Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today for our webinar covering the version 8.6 updates that were released just recently to Lakes Environmental's CALPUFF View software. We're glad you could be with us today so that we could go over these exciting new features and changes to the program. A quick introduction. My name is Michael Hammer, and I am a Senior Product Specialist for Lakes Environmental, as well as a Certified Consulting Meteorologist. So Lakes Environmental is based in Waterloo, Ontario. I am based in our satellite office in Dallas, Texas. We're recognized internationally for our air dispersion modeling software and IT solutions, consulting only on IT projects, and we were recently named one of 30 admired companies to watch by CIO Bulletin to go with some other recognitions that Lakes has earned over the years. So we're widely known for a lot of different things, particularly our software. CALPUFF View, of course, what we'll be addressing today. We have our IT solutions, including the Aquimus Cloud and FETS web applications. And you may have also attended our training courses, and we do have some CALPUFF training courses coming up. You can check those out on our website under the training section of upcoming courses. So let's dive into the new features in version 8.6 of CALPUFF View. For those of you who haven't used CALPUFF, the CALPUFF model before, it is primarily a long-range dispersion model looking at impacts out to 100, 200 kilometers away from sources. It's used for visibility analyses, and as the name implies, it is a puff dispersion model as opposed to plume models like ISCST3 and AirMod. Now, some of the new features that we've implemented into this release of CALPUFF View includes sensitive receptor reports with separate reports for both results summaries, including concentration, dry deposition, wet deposition, fluxes, and a separate report for percentile results so that you'll be able to quickly look at impacts from specific discrete receptors that you flag early in the modeling process. Another feature is the background data file maker, or back.dat file that goes into CalPost, which allows you to include hourly varying background concentrations for all of the species in your model run. We've made some improvements to the CalPost options within CALPUFF View, including the discrete receptor selection to make it a little more intuitive, easier to use so that you understand exactly what it is you're telling the model to produce. And then a number of refinements throughout the application, including automated file loading of some output files, some refinements to the parallel CalMet, and more. So now we're going to jump in and we're going to go straight to the CALPUFF View application. I have a sample project that I have worked on. Something you may also notice from the file menu in this update, we've expanded the list of most recently used projects. So you'll now see up to 8 of your most recently used projects within that file menu, making it easier to open projects. So I have my sample project pulled up. You'll notice there is a base map already loaded in there. And in this case, one thing I would like to do is import a satellite tile map. So if I go to the Import Tile Maps option, the OpenStreetMap is freely available, just a basic street map, of course. And then we have the Lakes Satellite option here. Lakes Satellite, of course, is only included for users with maintenance. But when I apply this option to my map, it now gives me increasing resolution as I zoom in over the map. So as I zoom in on my source, you see the map resolution increases along with that. And I can zoom back out. The wind field is already here. You can see my wind flow vectors in this project because the calmet.dat file already exists within here. And I have a series of nested grid receptors, but I also want to add some discrete receptors. The Receptors menu toolbar, I'm going to go to the Discrete Receptors option. And a longtime feature that we've had in our Discrete Receptors dialog here is the ability in the bottom left corner to automatically download Class 1 receptors. So if there is a Class 1 area which is a specialized area within the United States, typically needed for visibility modeling. You can click this button. It will analyze the project domain, and it pulls up any Class 1 areas that are within the project domain. Here it's Mammoth Cave National Park. I click OK. It analyzes the discrete receptors that make up Mammoth Cave, and it loads those into the discrete receptors table. And here is our first change to version 8.6. We now have the sensitive receptors column, which shows up just before the description. And in the sensitive receptors column, I can go through and select any individual discrete receptor that I would like to analyze later as sensitive in my sensitive receptor report. So if I look at my preview window, it's a little hard to see where those receptors are, so I can go in and zoom in to the specific discrete receptors overlay. I can also use the overlay control here on my toolbar, and I can remove some of the grid views that make it a little difficult to see what's going on, and zoom back in. And there's my list of discrete receptors for this location. So I can now go through and identify each of the individual receptors that I would like to mark as sensitive. So I've selected the two southernmost receptors. I can also come in, and as I highlight them, I see these receptors highlighted in the preview window, and I can enable which ones I would like to flag as sensitive or not. So I've got about 10, 11 receptors here flagged as sensitive. Everything else in my project has already been set up and ready to go. So I'll just quickly run CALPUFF. And as soon as CALPUFF is done running, you'll notice the files loaded automatically into the display window to give you that plume animation of your results. So I can sort this by concentration. I could look at my dry flux. I could look at my wet flux options, sort by the different species. Here I'm showing SO2, and scroll through hour by hour in my model run to look at those results. If you want to proceed to CalPost, this is where we see the next enhancement to version 8.6 of CALPUFF View. Under the receptor options here in the bottom left corner, we have selection options for the gridded and discrete receptors. Right now I have selected to analyze all gridded receptors and all discrete receptors, and I can select subsets thereof. So if I select the discrete receptors that I want to process here, in previous versions of CalPuff View, you would just identify numbers if you wanted to do only specified receptors. And so you would say process receptors 1 through 10 or 100 through 150, but it wasn't made entirely obvious right away which receptors you were really selecting. So we've refined this process so that you see the receptor ID of each discrete receptor, the X and Y coordinates, as well as confirmation for what was and what was not selected as a sensitive receptor. Because the sensitive receptor process is done as part of the output reporting, you can go back to your existing CalPuff run and select as sensitive and then return to CalPost to get those results in the separate report. I'm going to go ahead and process all my discrete receptors. I have all of my options already selected that I want for my current CalPost run, so I'll just go ahead and run those. It's processing a number of high values, some percentile outputs for each of my species. And then it gives me the run summary, and I know that CalPost has run successfully. The status of all my different species output is enabled here. And then that output is made available via the CalPost tree view. So I can see the first and second ranked values for the different averaging periods here, 1 hour and 24 hour for each of my species. If I come up to the toolbar then and select my reports, the sensitive receptors report, the next to the last report listed in the reports listing, I've filtered it based on which of the species I want to display, and then it shows me the X, the Y, the receptor ID, the receptor description, and the concentration and flux values for each of these different species, the different ranks, the different averaging periods. So for those receptors that I flagged, numbers 1, 2, 294 through 304, as well as 305, I can see those results highlighted in this report. So I don't have to go hunting and checking through all the other output data files that I've created to find the results of interest for these points. This can be done, again, for any discrete receptor that you want to add. So you can add individual discrete receptors at sensitive locations like hospitals, schools, nursing homes, residential neighborhoods, things of that nature. Add your IDs and descriptions so that you know which receptor is which, and all of that information will be pulled out into a separate sensitive receptors report. You can do the same with the percentile sensitive receptors report. A filter comes up for whatever species you want to analyze, and it's the same idea, except this time it highlights, instead of a high value, the different percentile value for each species and output type. These reports then can be saved out, exported to PDF. You can save them as their own files, so then you can do what you need to with these reports. So back in CALPUFF View, I already mentioned the enhancements then to our discrete receptor selection. A reminder that when you're selecting the discrete subset, you now have the ability to see more information about which receptors of interest you may want to process. Another major enhancement to CALPUFF View version 8.6 comes from the background tab of the CalPost wizard. The hourly background data file, or back.dat, has long existed in many, many versions of the CalPuff model. We have now added this FileMaker utility so that it is now easier to build your own background data file. And here is the background concentrations FileMaker. You can make these files for each individual species. So if you have hourly background data for your SO2, your NOx, your PM10, PM2.5, whatever it is, you can build individual files here. You'll notice the first thing along the top, we have our data, specify data period. We want this to match the period that was run in the CalPuff model, so you simply select the Set as CalPuff button, click Apply, and then the dates and times of that period will be automatically added to the table. You can then come through the table and apply single values to multiple hours at once. Using, for example, the Shift key, I selected the first hour, held down Shift, and selected the last hour of a period, and I can apply a background value to those selected hours, in this case 12. I could also come through and using the Control key, I could highlight individual hours throughout the period and apply different values to those. So you have numerous selection options here to fill in your tables. Here I'm going to come through and finish out the data and just make up some values to apply. The last thing that I would like to point out here is the conversion factor. The conversion factor is applied to the header of this file, and it's important because the native model output from CalPuff typically comes in, say, grams per meter cubed or micrograms per meter cubed, and you need to apply a conversion factor to get the proper output units recognized, for example, grams to micrograms. So the default conversion factor is 1/1,000,000, but you can change that to whatever you need, such as if you're modeling odor and your background concentrations are odor units per meters cubed, and you already had odor units as your unit noted in the CalPuff run, you could change that conversion factor accordingly. Once you've filled in all of the information, click Generate. You'll be asked where you want to save your file. I'm just going to call it so2 back.dat. save that directly in the project folder. Gives you a little warning if you didn't fill in any information that a missing indicator is applied. You can also select to view the file, and it's just a simple ASCII text file. So now that I've completed using the file maker, I can come in, and this was my SO2 background concentration file. Select the Browse button to pull up where I want to find this file. Specify hourly background data file, and I have my SO2 back.dat file here. So then I can come through, run this again. It will rerun all of my CalPost selections through the CalPost model, generate the necessary plot files, and then all of my results for SO2 are now going to include that background data that I did not have before. So whereas I had much lower numbers before, now I'm seeing numbers in the range of 22 to 50 because I'm now adding those hourly values anywhere from about 12 micrograms to 22 micrograms. And as I said, for the background data file maker, you can use this multiple times. So you can create separate background data files for each of the species of interest. You just load them in here. One caveat about using the background concentration options within CalPost. Currently, there is a bug which prevents the use of this type of file in the EPA-approved version of the CalPost post processor. So if you're running the EPA-approved modeling system of CalPost version 6.221, there will be an error if you attempt to use the back.dat file. We've been in contact with the model developer. They're currently looking at options that could be applied to fix that. But for version 6 and version 7, this is a great way to quickly create your hourly background data files. So that's just an overview of some of the main features we've included in this release. If you go to our website, www.weblakes.com, and you look at the latest news sidebar, you'll see an announcement about the release of this version, as well as a link to the full release notes. So if you're interested about reading some of the other features and fixes that were included with this release, I encourage you to go check those out there. Our next webinar is going to be on the subject of prognostic metadata. So obtaining met from prognostic models, the process that Lakes uses when you purchase data from us, whether it's AirMet Ready, CalMet Ready, CalPuff Ready, from WARF or from MM5, we'll have all the details on that. And that's going to be Thursday, November 15th. We'll have, again, 2 separate webinars, one at 11 a.m. Eastern Time and one at 4 p.m. You can go to our website, weblakes.com/training/webinars.html. That's where we have a whole list of our upcoming and previous webinars there, and there are registration links already posted there so that you can attend our next webinar. So again, I want to thank you for attending this webinar today. I hope you learned about some of the new and exciting features of version 8.6 of CalPuff View. If you have any questions, please send those in. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.